There's a specific kind of silence that makes most people reach for their phone within 11 seconds. No notification, no reason. Just the silence itself becomes unbearable. Most people will spend their entire life arranging their schedule so they never have to sit in it for too long. Today, I want to show you why that silence is actually the most powerful room you'll ever walk into, and why almost nobody trains themselves to stay in it. By the end of this video, you'll know why the most unbothered, unshakable people share one thing in common, and it's not confidence. It's something quieter than that. Why some people lose a relationship and grieve, while others lose it and lose themselves completely. And the real difference between isolating yourself and choosing solitude because they look identical from the outside and confusing the two can quietly wreck you. Then I'll give you the exact practice that builds this. Not a mindset shift, something you can start tonight. If you've ever needed people around just to feel okay, stay for this. This isn't about becoming antisocial or shutting people out. It's about becoming the kind of person nothing can take anything from. And that starts in a place most people are running from. Most people think they're afraid of being lonely. They're not. Loneliness is just a feeling, and feelings pass. What people are actually afraid of is something underneath that. When you're alone with no distractions, no one to perform for, no conversation to keep going, you're left with your own mind exactly as it is. No editing, no audience. Just you and whatever happens to be running through your head in that moment. For a lot of people, that's terrifying. Not because solitude is dangerous, but because the moment it gets quiet enough, every unprocessed thought, every unanswered question about your life, every feeling you've been out running with noise, it all surfaces. And most people would rather do almost anything than sit with that. So they fill the silence. A show in the background, a scroll that doesn't end. A call to someone not because they have something to say, but because the alternative is being alone with themselves. And here's the part that matters. The thing they're avoiding isn't being alone. It's what being alone reveals. This is where it gets uncomfortable, because a lot of what looks like socializing is actually avoidance, wearing a friendlier costume. Constantly needing someone in the room isn't always connection. Sometimes it's regulation. You feel okay because someone else is there to feel okay around. Take them away and the floor disappears. That's not a flaw in your personality. It's just what happens when your sense of being okay was never built from the inside. It was borrowed from whoever happened to be standing next to you. And borrowed stability has a cost. You start shaping your opinions around the room instead of forming them first and bringing them into the room. You start needing reassurance after every decision instead of trusting the one you already made. You start treating other people's attention like oxygen, something you can't function without, instead of something you simply enjoy. None of this makes you weak. It makes you human, because almost everyone is raised this way. But it does mean that somewhere along the line, you outsourced a job that was supposed to be yours. The job of telling yourself you're okay. So what actually happens when you stop outsourcing that? When you spend real time alone, not killing time, not waiting for the next notification, but actually present in your own company, something starts to rebuild. You start noticing your own thoughts before anyone else gets to react to them first. You start making decisions and knowing they're right, not because a group agreed, but because you sat with it long enough to be sure. This is self-trust, and it's not built in a single moment of inspiration. It's built the same way physical strength is built, through repeated exposure to something slightly uncomfortable until it stops being uncomfortable at all. The first few times you sit in silence on purpose, it will feel like nothing is happening. Stay anyway. Because what's actually happening is you're learning that you can be in a room with just yourself and survive it. And once you know you can survive your own company, you stop needing everyone else's permission to feel like you're doing okay. Now, here's where this changes something most people never think about, and it's relationships. Picture two people. The first built their entire sense of worth around having a partner. Without someone there, they don't quite know who they are. The relationship isn't an addition to their life, it is their life. The second person is genuinely content on their own. Not performing contentment, actually content. For them, a relationship is something they want, not something propping up the entire structure underneath them. Now picture both of those relationships ending. The first person doesn't just lose a partner, they lose the only foundation they had. Everything that was resting on that one person comes down with it, and what's left underneath isn't grief, it's collapse. And collapse does things to people that grief alone never would. It's not an excuse, and it never justifies what comes next, but it explains why some of the most devastating reactions to heartbreak come from people who had nothing of their own to stand on, once that one thing was gone. When your entire identity depends on someone else staying, losing them doesn't just hurt, it can unmake you. The second person loses that same relationship and something completely different happens. They grieve. Genuinely, fully, sometimes for a long time. But they don't disappear because the relationship was never the floor they were standing on. It was something good added on top of a floor that was already there. That's the actual difference contentment makes. Not that it removes the pain of loss, it removes the catastrophe of loss. And that's worth building, regardless of whether you're in a relationship right now or not. But I need to be careful here, because everything I've just said could easily be twisted into something unhealthy if you take it too far in the wrong direction. There's a version of being alone that builds you, and there's a version that quietly destroys you. And from the outside, they can look exactly the same. So let's separate them properly. Solitude is alone time you choose from a place of strength. You're not avoiding people, you're simply not dependent on them. And when you do see people, you actually show up better because of the time you spent recharging and thinking clearly. Isolation is alone time you fall into from a place of fear, resentment, or avoidance. You're not choosing peace, you're avoiding pain, and instead of recharging you, it slowly drains you. It makes you more bitter, not more clear, more disconnected, not more grounded. Here's how you tell the difference in your own life. After solitude, you generally feel more like yourself, calmer, clearer, maybe even a little excited to talk to someone again. After isolation, you usually feel worse the longer it goes on. Heavier, more resentful, more convinced that people are the problem rather than just less necessary to you right now. If being alone is making you sharper and steadier, that's solitude. Keep going. If being alone is making you bitter, numb, or more disconnected the longer it continues, that's isolation, and it deserves real attention. Maybe a conversation with someone you trust, because what looks like independence from the outside might actually be a wound that's gone quiet rather than one that's healed. This is the actual distinction behind a lone wolf, and it's almost always misunderstood. People think the lone wolf is someone who couldn't get people to stick around, so isolation became the only option left. That's not it at all. A real lone wolf isn't isolated, he's simply not desperate. He can walk into any room and connect with people just fine. He's just never confused connection with survival. He doesn't need the room to agree with him before he trusts his own read on things. He doesn't need a relationship to feel complete, because he already does. That's not coldness, that's not arrogance either. It's just a person who did the work of becoming whole on their own first, so that everything after that is wanted rather than needed. That's the actual target here. Not fewer people in your life, just less of your stability depending on them being there. So here's how you actually build this, because understanding it changes nothing if you don't practice it. Start small. Spend 15 minutes a day completely alone with no phone, no music, no distraction, just you and whatever your mind does in that space. It will feel pointless at first. Sit with that feeling instead of escaping it. Increase it over time. Take a walk with nothing in your ears. Eat a meal without a screen in front of you. Make a decision without immediately needing someone else's opinion on it first, and notice how uncomfortable that is, and do it anyway. The discomfort isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign the muscle is finally being used. Pay attention to what comes up in that silence. If it's mostly noise and restlessness at first, that's normal. That's the static clearing. But if you notice it's mostly heaviness, mostly resentment, mostly things that feel too big to sit with alone, that's worth bringing to someone you trust rather than carrying by yourself. Solitude is a practice. It is not a replacement for actual support when you need it. The goal was never to need no one. The goal was to stop needing everyone, so that the people who do stay in your life are there because you want them, not because you'd come apart without them. This is what I have no enemies actually means. It's not about being untouchable or above everyone else. It's about reaching a point internally where you don't need conflict, validation, or constant company to know who you are. You don't need enemies because you're not performing for an audience anymore. You don't need allies in the sense of people propping you up because you're not leaning on anyone to stay standing. You can still love people deeply, still want them close, still grieve them if they leave. But none of that determines whether you're okay. You already decided that on your own, in the silence, a long time before anyone else walked into the room.